able to join. Some of them should already in the waiting room. Hi, Jamie. Hi, Daniela.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. How is everything?
It's good. Good. We always stay busy, right? Everyone.
Always. Yes. But it's great to have you, and yeah, this time will be hacker free. Yeah, exactly. And we can see our audience slowly growing. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. We really appreciate your presence. I believe we can officially start the webinar. Welcome everyone. On behalf of the Longevity Education Hub, it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Jamie Justice, the EVP of the XPrize Healthspan competition, the adjunct professor of gerontology and geriatric medicine at the Wake Forest School of Medicine. Welcome, Dr. Justice. Thank you so much for agreeing to meet with us. With us is also Dr. Evelyne Bischof, the co-author of Longevity Medicine Education courses, and Dr. Daniela Bakula from the Aging Research and Drug Discovery meeting. And with this, I would like to welcome our three panelists. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dominika, our great coordinator of the Longevity Education Hub, which is the CME accredited longevity medicine education. And we've started a series of webinars recently, and we are extremely honored to have Professor Jamie Justice with us today. And because we not only have this great honor and pleasure to have this webinar today, we also have some good news to share. We therefore have Professor Daniela Bakula from the University of Copenhagen, who will give us the honor to introduce our speaker and also to share some news about the upcoming event that is thematically related to what we will be talking about today.
Yeah, thanks, Evelyne. So I will share some slides. Okay. Can you see the slide? Or? Okay, great. So hello, everyone. So thanks, Evelyne and Dominika, for the introduction. And I'm very excited to invite you to the Aging Research and Drug Discovery meeting. This year, it will be our 11th edition. And over the year, it really became the largest industry event in aging research. So originally, the meeting was actually organized by Alex as part of the Basel Life Week in Switzerland. And then several years later, Morten Skarbø Knudsen joined also as the co-chair. And I think I joined from the 7th edition. And nowadays, ARDD is hosted in Copenhagen. And this year it will be from August 26 to August 30. And you can join us on site at the ceremonial hall, which you can see here in the background. And it's a very beautiful and historical building in Copenhagen, in Denmark. Or you can also participate still online. So what I really personally enjoy the most about ARDD is the energy and dynamic at the meeting. So we have a very diverse mix of experts from basic research, but also a lot of clinical scientists and industry professionals and also investors. And so it's really a great opportunity to collaborate across different disciplines. And here you can see our lineup of speakers. It's really exceptional this year, and we will add many more of the speakers in the coming weeks. And just to mention some of them, we have, for example, David Sinclair joining us, Linda Partridge, Nir Barzilai, Eric Burden, Vera Gorbunova, Vadim Gladyshev, and many more. And this year also the involvement of the pharma industry is bigger than ever. So we have representatives from Novartis, from Pfizer, from Eli Lilly, from Regeneron, and Lundbeck and Novo Nordisk. And also this year we will have different tracks. And one track is, for example, focusing on longevity medicine, which is hosted by Evelyne. Then we have also the pharma industry track and an emerging technology track. and of course also a program that is focusing on basic aging research. So, and this event, of course, wouldn't be possible without our sponsors. And because we are a non-profit organization, so we rely completely on sponsorships, and it's really wonderful. And we're very grateful to have all those companies that support our event. And in the end, they also shape, of course, the program. Yeah, so in this year, we are in particular excited about the partnership with XPrize Healthspan. I think their global $101 million competition is really a major milestone towards clinical applications to extend human healthspan. And I'm sure Jamie, who is the executive vice president of the health domain of XPrize, she will give us in her presentation more details about the global competition. Yeah, and XPrize Healthspan, they will host their first team summit at ARDD this year. And it will be on the first day of ARDD. And there, Jamie and her XPrize colleagues, I've seen recently the program which they have organized, and it's a very interesting and informative program. They have invited international experts to provide an overview of the guidelines for the Healthspan Prize. So we strongly recommend that you register soon, because our event will reach very fast the capacity. And what you can expect at the meeting is you can meet more than 120 speakers and more than 700 on-site participants. So it's really, as mentioned, a really great opportunity for networking. And we have also every evening an open bar night, which is also a great possibility to meet new people. And as mentioned, there will be a lot of investors, which is very relevant for companies and in particular for startup companies. And for startup companies, we have this year for the first time a startup pitch session. And so if you're part of a startup company, just get in contact with us if you're interested in the startup pitch session. And yeah, so if you want to register for the conference, please go to our website, agingpharma.org. There you will also find all relevant details. And you can also contact us always directly if you have any questions. Yeah, and we really look forward, I guess, all of us to another ARDD conference, and in particular this year with the partnership with XPrize Healthspan. Yeah. With this, Evelyne, do you want to introduce Jamie, or shall I? Or?
As you wish. We can. I know that Jamie will also be so kind to say a few words, right, about your career and how things evolved towards now this great role as a leader of the Healthspan XPrize. So perhaps without further ado, we will turn to you, Jamie, if you mind. I think it's needless to say that Jamie is one of the top leaders and experts in the field of neurosciences. She's a Ph.D., she's a professor. She's been involved in many groundbreaking developments in the field, from the clinical trials translation to N1, the clinical trials developments, and so on. But I think also what the future holds is even bigger. Therefore, really excited. And thank you, Jamie. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, or actually, I guess, to be back. So we tried this a couple weeks ago, and we were unexpectedly interrupted. So I'm glad to be back and really glad to share today. And as mentioned, yes, I am now the executive director for XPrize Healthspan, which is a $101 million global competition to change the way we treat human aging. And also, as mentioned, I didn't just drop into this, but this has been my career and my focus. And so my work was originally started at University of Colorado in Boulder in the United States, where I was studying some of the underlying mechanisms that lead to declines in physical function and mobility with aging. And through that, I became interested not just cataloging all of the changes that occur, but really trying to see if there are practical interventions that can actually target some of that biology to extend health span and lifespan. And so in my earlier training I worked to look at interventions in a translational perspective. So looking at interventions, I was in the clinical research centers in the morning, working with middle-aged and older adults, testing various nutraceutical supplements and lifestyle interventions. And in the afternoon, we would translate and do a lot of that same work we were doing in clinic to go in and get more mechanistic insight, and doing that work in animal models in our vivarium in our procedure rooms in the afternoon. So we conducted lifespan studies. And my interest in those studies was actually developing really robust measures of health that are as close as we can get to one-to-one with what we're looking at in the clinic. From there, expanded into work at Wake Forest University School of Medicine, looking, one of the unique things about Wake Forest that drew me there is that, one, they have a really active and well-developed aging research program, which was of interest to me, and it was deeply fused with clinical medicine. So we were in the Department of Internal Medicine. We worked hand in hand with our docs. We had opportunities to go and round at the same time that we're doing really innovative research into some of that basic biology. And it was a great opportunity. The other thing they had was basically a retirement colony for non-human primates. And so again, these retirement colonies, it's really, monkeys live a long time. And so looking at things in monkeys, they develop multimorbidity, they have cognitive decline, they show physical decline. They do a lot of the things that we see as a long-lived species that we also see in humans. And they have really complex social dynamics. And so it was a great opportunity again, is to do these really long-term kind of lifespan studies, but looking also in non-human primates that are really well characterized, and mapping that back to what we're also doing in people. But what I learned in my short time initially was that monkeys are not big mice or small humans. They're their very own, and they require a very special touch. So I chose to specialize and really focus on human health. And my work there was, I was at a really fortunate place where when my training started, there was this whole field of geroscience that had just begun. And where, that it wasn't a far-fetched idea that we might be able to target the biology of aging, that this was something that could be trained and was very feasible and practical to actually study and make progress. So I consider myself the first of a generation of geroscientists, which really, again, this goes hand in hand with this longevity medicine. It's a different perception of how we look at and think about and treat aging. And so my work there, I got very involved, was very lucky to have the opportunity to begin with a geroscience network and various faculty exchange programs, as we were actually figuring out how do you advance testing and begin to standardize and align thoughts and ideas so that we can actually make advancements in a much larger scale than any one group can do alone. And we did this through, again, a geroscience network, published series of papers, held multiple consensus retreats. And out of those, we developed frameworks for translational testing of gerotherapeutics. So this was a geroscience network. Translational geroscience network was formed out of this that developed frameworks for early stage clinical trials, testing gerotherapeutics. And I was fortunate to be involved in that as one of the core leaders of the biobanking committee, and also involved in biomarker testing and developing one of our first use cases out of that experience, which was a trial of senolytics, dasatinib and quercetin. Those same meetings and that same group and retreat structure, we've realized that if we really want to make progress, we need to have an indication or a target for drug and therapeutic development that would be recognized by regulatory agencies. And so out of those initial meetings in 2013, 2014, into 2015, that's where the TAME trial was conceived. And so this was a trial targeting aging with metformin that was designed with the sole intent of creating a regulatory pathway for drug development or drugs that target human aging. And so I was very lucky to be involved at the ground level at that, and did my postdoctoral training there. And that evolved actually into a position on the executive committee for the TAME trial. So I'll speak a little bit about that in today's talk, but throughout those experiences, whether looking at therapeutics, dietary interventions, nutraceuticals, repurposed drugs, is that I've not been committed to a single drug or mechanism. The goal is, again, is to find holistic and probably multifactorial ways that we can combine these things to actually improve human aging and develop those frameworks. So again, remaining sort of drug agnostic, but really focused on how we are testing and what we are doing. And that led me to, excuse me, I've got the wrong screen up. I thought I shared the right one. Let me try this again. And so that really led me to, let me try this one more time. To XPrize. This is still not working, is it? Are you guys seeing a screen that has slides?
Yes.
Okay, great.
We can see this. Yes.
Okay, good. Screen with slides, and they are advancing? Perfect. Okay, good. Thank goodness. Great. So this led me to XPrize, where I was in my lab. Things were going really well. I had was actually doing work on a large-scale study on muscle mobility and aging called SOMA study, and also looking at the roles of adipose tissue on mobility decline and aging. We're conceiving a new time-restricted eating or caloric restriction trial for older adults through a planning grant. I had just turned in my promotion and tenure materials, and then I got a call from XPrize. And they had raised over $100 million to launch a global competition in exactly the field that I've been working in, is to get recognition to overcome some key barriers into how we approach the treatment and therapeutic developments for aging. And so again, so now I'm here at XPrize as the executive director. And so for those who don't know, I'm going to give you a little crash course on what XPrize is. So XPrize, I had no idea what it was when I first got a call about a year ago. Not a clue. I'd never heard of it. But it's a nonprofit foundation, and the goal is quite lofty. It's to accelerate an equitable, abundant future for all. And what really kicked it off was in the 1990s, so actually 1994. So it's been around for 30 years. And the original prize was actually to incentivize the development of manned spacecraft and move those out of simply a federal or country by country, and start to see what you could do to democratize and also develop commercial interest in possibly going into space. I think we all can watch the news and realize that this has been a wildly successful endeavor. And some of that is a result of this initial push. And so what they had as a goal was not to get teams or commercial teams to go to the moon. The goal was actually to have the teams for this prize was to create a manned spacecraft. So it had to hold 3 people. It needed to launch and travel 100 kilometers. So again, not the moon, but achievable, but really, really difficult to do at that time. And it had to do that twice within 2 weeks. And so again, this is sort of an initial push, and the initial prize was $10 million. It was ultimately won. It took 10 years for a team to develop a craft capable of doing that. But a team did win, and $10 million obviously is not enough to support all of the research and development necessary to build a craft and launch a craft twice. But it was just enough of incentive to turn the public perception, attention, and drive investment in the area that actually made this possible. So again, those are just a couple of key prize concepts. Since that initial prize, the Ansari XPrize that was for space, XPrize has been around for 30 years. I would say they're one of the best kept secrets. And they have launched, over 30 prizes during that time across a really wide spectrum of everything, again, from space to what we call the big 3 prizes. We have one, again, my prize in Healthspan, which launched in November. There was an Elon Musk funded carbon removal prize that was $100 million that launched about 2 years ago and is coming to a close soon. And one that was even larger, our largest prize just launched last month. It's a water scarcity prize. It's a $119 million prize purse to a team who can develop scalable solutions to desalinate water. So again, really big prizes, really big efforts across a huge spectrum, everything from learning in society to, novel biomedical solutions to major global challenges, and, rainforest conservation, wildfires, and everything in between. All right, so that's a story on XPrize. And so I mentioned we have these big three, and these are based in and around climate and energy, food, waste, water. So there's a current prize that's drawing to a close soon to create sustainable alternative meat products, and others that are, again, that water scarcity prize that is to desalinate water, and of course our large prize in health. But this gives a snapshot, right, is that some of these prizes, yes, you put a big amount of money out there. And what that does is it serves as a catalyst. It's like a very large goal for teams to chase after. And in doing so, we drive investment from within those particular fields, and energy there. And the return on this has been really pretty astounding. So again, we have launched over $500 million in cumulative prize purses. Those big three are still active, so they've not been awarded yet. But we have still awarded over $150 million in prizes. There's many more currently in development, and being that we do a lot of philanthropic fundraising. Most of these sources are provided through philanthropic sources. We're a nonprofit. And again, the big leverage point is that these large scale prizes, they really do drive investment. And so for over $500 million launched, there has already been over $4 billion invested by competing teams and the surrounding industries. So again, that's why we do them. And we also do this to create global collaborative frameworks. And so getting teams from across the world to really participate and join together is that I think this is where we really can drive changes needed to tackle some of these great global challenges like aging. We've not been able to do this one lab or one study at a time. And even in the US, I think our sites have been a little bit too limited. We've been so focused on the FDA that we don't often recognize and really try to accelerate or advance progress globally. So this is a great model to actually drive change. And we sometimes call these not just competitions, but they're like collaboratitions, is that we pull people together, is that no one team is going to have the solution. So we actually have to work together to align to really drive those and create those breakthroughs that are needed. So in health, again, within the health landscape, as we've had a number of prizes, health really formed and became very active in pandemic and had a few pandemic-related challenges. They also have a history in developing prizes around diagnostics and other AI-based tools to drive progress. And our most recent, of course, is Healthspan, which I'm going to talk about now. So why did XPrize become interested in aging? I'm sure I don't need to talk to this group about why aging is so important. Our global population is aging. This should be a cause for celebration. We get to experience more springs. We have more opportunity. This is an incredible, incredible human success story. But as we know, those years that we have are not necessarily spent in good health. And so we do need innovative solutions to address the global age-related health declines, and we need them now. To illustrate this point again, this is a favorite figure by a demographer in the United States named J. Olshansky, and he published this a few years ago. But looking at the timeline of going from the early 1900s in the black line to, I believe this was 2016 in the blue line, as you can see that the median age, so our life expectancy has increased by 62%. So you can see that by where that peak in those curves falls, is that it has shifted. And yet, as demonstrated in that red line, what we haven't necessarily tackled is how well we are living. And so though we are living longer, many older adults are actually spending those extended years in an extended period of frailty disability. And so we really do need urgent preventive and treatment options to improve quality of life as we age, because this increase in life expectancy for many has been at the cost of an increased period of age-related functional decline, disease, and disability. This is a classic figure within the field that looks and shows deaths due to different conditions. Many of these conditions have very few similar clinical risk factors, but the one thing that is common across them, hiding in plain sight, is that aging is the strongest risk factor for anything as disparate as heart disease, cancers, and even accidents. And so unless we begin to target the root cause that cuts across these diseases, which we believe is biological aging, then we're unlikely to have a measurable impact, because our modeling has shown that death from one disease will simply be replaced by another. So that if you don't die due to heart disease, if we just cured heart disease, then you would still probably likely die from cancer, emphysema, pneumonia, or something else. And so what the field has demonstrated over the last 10 to 20 plus years is that this biology can be targeted. So initial studies done in animal models actually found a couple of gene variants that could be manipulated in model organisms, from C. elegans to Drosophila or flies, that you could actually do some manipulations and you can extend lifespan by quite a lot. And not only genetics, but these are create various drug targets. There are also, some of the most robust therapeutics for human aging are not drugged at all, but caloric restriction and dietary interventions have very robust effects that are conserved across many species and that are highly translatable. And there's an interventions testing program in the US that's like a multi-center clinical trial for mice. And that has given us really great insights into certain drugs, supplements, nutraceuticals, and other approaches that can robustly affect lifespan, and not just lifespan, but also show effects on health. And various biologic features underlying some of those declines. And it shows that these are quite robust. And there are many different things that have been tested. That interventions testing program in the US has shown some really striking results, especially for nutraceutical supplements and repurposed drugs. But there are many other groups across around the world that have been testing these in independent laboratories. And there are newer, and I would say novel, sort of cutting edge therapies that are coming out and being discovered now. Whether these are, certainly partial reprogramming has captured the public attention recently, but there are stem cell therapies, gene therapies, other biologics, and other novel compounds that are currently in development that show a lot of progress. And especially as we're beginning to better harness tools like AI for drug discovery, the options here are really expanding. And it's an incredibly exciting time to be in the field. But taking some of these discoveries and trying to bring them in and start doing this testing in humans has resulted in a major translational gap. In any research pipeline, this is the gap, is going, what do you prove in mice, and how do you carry it into humans? How do you carry it out of the lab and actually test it in real people? This is always a gap. But in the case of aging, where we don't have a lot of consensus or alignment around groups, is that this gap becomes almost incomprehensibly large. And so though these therapeutics are being developed and tested, poor public perception has led to a lot of actually decrease in funding and decrease in attention and disbelief. It's also that us as scientists, we have not had a very clear way to gain alignment, either in our terminology, our testing frameworks, and our guidelines that we put out. And collectively, this has led to a lot of unclear regulatory pathways. It's not the job of the FDA or the regulators to tell us what an indication is. It's the scientists and the clinicians and the other key stakeholders coming together and actually telling our regulatory agencies, like, we need this, and then they can drive and react to what we bring them. And so it's a major effort that's needed. We need a lot of consensus alignment, and we have to change public perception and drive funding in this area so that we can actually advance some of these promising therapeutics to make a difference in how we treat human aging in our lifetime. And again, this, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, this has been my academic focus. This has been my entire career, has been around answering this one question, is if we had an intervention that could delay human aging, how would we even know? And I have now the opportunity to take this not just for my academic work, but to try to bring this to more global attention through a prize that I'll describe in a moment. But as mentioned before, in the absence of a regulatory landscape, we have had a couple of efforts that have gone on. I mentioned the translational geroscience. I've mentioned TAME trial. I'll show you where these sort of fall. In the translational geroscience network is that we developed some frameworks for how do you test drugs. Our first use case was looking at xenotherapeutics. So these are things that target a particular cell type called cell senescence. And we initially tested them, and our first proof of concept trial was in idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. And then we've tried to standardize some of those protocols so that those same drugs or agents can be tested, with slight variation between the different protocols in a number of different age-related diseases and conditions. And we do it this way because, again, you want to have an indication or some commercial turnaround for those therapeutics, once you go through the trouble of funding a clinical trial. And so in the absence of having that or a way to balance the risk and the benefit, testing them in different age-related diseases has been really the path forward, especially for early stage novel therapeutic testing. And again, not one of these diseases on its own is aging. And so the hope is that if you harmonize and align across groups, what you can get at the end of this is a snapshot or a picture, some kind of mosaic, if you stand back far enough, looks like aging. On the other side of this, have been involved in efforts that where we collectively try to draw consensus by investigators, scientists, key stakeholders, and regulatory officials to begin to define a priori what an aging outcome would be. And if we're looking at one that speaks to the FDA or to regulatory officials or even to clinicians, is that really developing these is you want to be able to show that your drug or your therapeutic, that the benefit outweighs the risk. And when that burden of proof is being met, at least at the FDA level, is that we're looking at things or agents that can change the way we function, feel, or survive. So that's the general framework, is that's the burden of proof. And so we've gone about trying to develop consensus for this. I've mentioned the TAME trial targeting aging with metformin. And there was also work that I left at Wake Forest that's still ongoing, is to how do you develop this not just for drug trials, but for lifestyle interventions like caloric restriction or time-restricted eating. And so these are some major movements in the field coming out. The two of these have to happen in tandem, is you need a pathway and a pipeline for early stage testing, just like you need a pathway for once you've de-risked those to go into a large scale trial that can speak to the FDA. And so we're trying to make that bridge at XPrize. I'm just going to show you really carefully, really quickly. Again, this was the TAME trial for those who are not familiar. It was designed as a trial to be run in persons who are older aged, who are a fairly generalizable population, and looking at metformin versus placebo in a 6-year multi-center trial. And the outcome for that spoke to the FDA was a clinical outcome, as it had to show that we change the time to incidence, or the time that a new age-related disease appears out of these certain classes that share very few risk factors other than age. What was most actually important to most of the scientists in the group, and also most of the clinicians and people who care for older adults, as well as our key community stakeholders, so people who are aging and would be the ones taking a drug or taking that risk or changing their behaviors, is what was the most meaningful to them was not necessarily clinical disease. What was the most meaningful was often that functional endpoint, is can I maintain my mental and cognitive faculties? Can I still get out of my house and move around? Is my mobility maintained or even extended? And then again, on the scientist side, are we changing the biology? And so looking at those biomarkers. And so this is a framework that, again, it is scalable. And so when we're thinking about how we test interventions for human aging, we think about these things on a continuum. And that continuum for these trials, you have on one side, molecular level biologic changes that are really meaningful in the short term and can be shown very quickly, but they may not have the salience or the importance to older adults or to regulatory officials. And so those things that are there that are tend to be the most salient, that if you look at it, you're like, okay, I think we've really done something here. That's where we're looking at median lifespan extension, maybe the development of key geriatric syndromes, frailty, multimorbidity, and that there's got to be a sweet spot somewhere in between. As mentioned, the FDA is really interested in things that be clinically adjudicated. It's like an on-off switch. It's a very binary. Do you have this event? Do you not? Is this disease recurring? Is it not? Are you hospitalized? Are you not? But for most of us, again, on the scientific side, this leads a whole lot of work that still needs to be done at the earlier side of translation to even get to where we're ready to have those trials, and they have to feed each other. And so in XPrize, where we're really focusing in at is on these short turnarounds. If you remember that first space flight, they didn't go to the moon. That first space flight went 100 kilometers. And so this is the equivalent of that 100-kilometer sprint, is how do you go from the lab to early stage testing, and that you show effects in some of these function, feel, survive metrics, but at this earlier end. And so that's the global that we're looking at. And so how this prize is structured is that we actually have two prizes. The main prize is a $101 million healthspan prize. And then there's a bonus prize that's $10 million for a rare genetic disease called FSHD. So this is a type of muscular dystrophy. One of our first donors is not just a philanthropist, but he is also a person who is aging with FSHD. And so it's a muscular condition that accelerates or accentuates many of the muscular and physical phenotypes of aging. So again, within aging, we know that there are these huge barriers that we really need to improve and break through the loss of function and disease and frailty that's seen at the end of life. And we need this through proactive, accessible therapeutics. And so the mission of XPrize Healthspan is to provide proof of concept that biologic aging is a target for drug, biologic, or device development, to stimulate a global research network in healthspan and aging research. And we want to do this by aligning labs, companies, and researchers together. Lead to important investments in longevity and biology of aging, and also biotech. And again, through this collaborative effort is to develop new technologies for how we're going to measure healthspan in early stage trials and provide a framework for future discovery. And finally, is given that benefactor who really wants some urgent solutions and to drive attention for FSHD. All right, and so what we're proposing teams to do is really ambitious. It's a 7-year prize, and we have milestones along the way. But our winning team must demonstrate that their therapeutic treatment can restore muscle, cognitive, and immune function in older persons, and that therapeutic treatment must be administered in 1 year or less. And how the prize is awarded is indexed to basically the magnitude of the improvement that's shown in 1 year. And so the money that's tied to that is we've linked it to the percent improvement that would be expected in 10 years, 15, or 20 years. And so the larger the impact of that therapeutic, the more money the team is eligible to win. And as I showed there, that top dollar is only 81 million because we do have milestone points where we give out money along the way to drive attention, awareness, and lead to important investments for the teams that advance. Later this year, we'll have a qualifying submission that will be due on December 20th. The exact rules and stipulations for that are forthcoming. They're being reviewed internally right now, and we hope to release them soon. Those qualifying submissions are going to be a pen and paper based on the research and development that's done to date. Those will have an independent judging panel that will review those applications and select the top 40 teams that look like they are most likely to go to trial within a year, and again, make those really large improvements in health and function. There is, again, in that bonus track, 8 teams will be awarded at that stage, and they'll go immediately on to finals. Okay, so those are going to be awarded early in 2025. Those teams then go into semifinals, which is they have to actually conduct a small-scale proof of concept study. So this is recruiting anywhere 5, 10, 20 people, whatever they need to show that they're therapeutic, that they de-risk it. Is what can you do in a very short turnaround, 30, 60 days, whatever it is, if you still need that time to show that you can actually administer this therapeutic in humans and that you have your regulatory frameworks in place and that your clinical center is up and running and can recruit subjects. So this really de-risks the finals for us and gives us an opportunity to recognize and award teams that are actually doing the hard work of moving therapeutics from the lab into early stage trials. And so we'll review the data that's collected at that point. They'll submit that data to us at the end of in 2026. Our judges review it, select the top 10 teams who are considered our finalists. Those finalists will award each one $1 million. We'll administer a clinical protocol book that shows all of the things that we're going to do for judging, and they have to conduct those trials at their sites. We'll do site visits. We join them. We're part of it. There's going to be a lot of media attention. We'll have documentary crews, camera crews, and other groups going around to really meet those teams and try to drive interest and investments to make sure that the gap that's necessary for funding to run those trials isn't the issue. So during the finals, teams are going to run those trials, and we'll have a data portal for upload that will be reviewed by a centralized judging committee. We'll have those analyzed. The reports go back to our judges, and they'll make the awarding. And again, before those trials start, we're going to set out what those thresholds that are needed to achieve for each of those monetary milestones. Again, the key timelines for this, we're really early in this 7-year phase. We just launched. We're actually in a pre-registration phase and getting guidance and ideas from all of our potential teams. We'll put out our qualifying submissions call this July, and that will also be accompanied by the final competition guidelines that our teams will be requested to follow. Judging in 2025 for semifinals, the finals start in 2026. That leaves a few years for 1-year studies. Data will close in 2029 for judging, and those awarding determinations will take place by 2030. Each year, we'll also have team summits, town halls, networks, partnership activities, as was already noted, and I'll have a slide later. The big one, you guys have to mark your calendar. Aging Research Drug Discovery is our inaugural team summit. We'll have just started our primary registration. It's a great chance to come and meet the operations team, learn about the design, talk about qualifying submissions, and follow along in the process. All right, so again, how to win. I'm just going to focus on the finals because I know we don't have a lot of time. All right, so how to win. This is only the finals. So if you happen to make it to one of those top 10 teams, you have to have, this is something in clinical trials lingo we call PICO or PICOT. And it's your population intervention control group outcomes and time. And so for the population, these are going to be, people have a lot of flexibility to define their population they want to run these trials in. Again, balancing that risk benefit, as I mentioned earlier, you can figure out who you need to test in, but these are persons, they have to be free of life-threatening or major diseases and disability. So we want to make sure that that therapeutic is really improving health and that you're not simply treating an existing disease and just tracking that treatment. We really want to focus it there. The sample size estimates are going to be based on each team's determination of their own sort of the effect they expect and the population they're looking at. But we anticipate that these are going to be around 40 to 200 participants per trial. For feasibility, we really do have to cap that at 200. Intervention is, again, it's up to the teams. We leave the solution and democratize that. Our teams come up with it and tell us what they're going to do, as long as it's safe. Control group, yeah, required, but it's going to depend on the specifics of the design. In fact, we're really going to be promoting with this and suggesting we might just make it part of the clinical design. We'll be announcing this summer. We're still making key decisions right now, but it is very likely that these are going to be N of 1 structured trials so that a participant can be their own control group. So you have an extended ramp or baseline measurement, and we can really track improvement relative to that. These are aggregate N of 1, so you can still have another control group for a referent if you need it, but it doesn't require some of the same one-to-one randomization schemes. And so again, look for that. If you go to ARDD, we're going to give a sort of a basics and a couple of 101s on what those look like and what that strategy looks like. But the hope is that if we can really drive advancement in clinical trial design, especially at early stage, is we'll have things that really apply to clinic. So for those of you here that are in longevity medicine and maybe run clinics or treating patients, this is actually how you're going to be administering, is you're going to be watching each person. How do they respond? And it might be able to help us personalize some of these approaches. Okay, so again, yes, a control group, but we're going to talk about what that looks like. The outcomes, really important. We're going to give a playbook that shows you exactly what measurements that need to be done. But these are going to be improvements in muscle, cognitive, and immune function. All three are required, and that timeline is 1 year. And so again, our playbook is coming out. Our advisory group are making determinations this month and suggestions for gold standard, and then what, if you don't have that gold standard measure, what additional measures may be. Within muscle, again, muscle function is broad. We're really looking at a couple of performance-based measures for each one of these, followed and supported by a biospecimen-based measure. So for muscle, when we're thinking about this, it's not, there's not one kind of muscle. We are looking at muscle strength and power. That's probably going to be the key metric that's used, but we'll also be supported by some kind of a mobility and endurance type measure. Muscle mass can be measured in a number of ways. Imaging may be harder to standardize globally, but we'll leave that up to some of our teams. There are certainly things we can do with biospecimens like a deuterated creatine or other metric that can be done safely and easily through urine. Cognition, again, looking at performance-based measures. What do we do to improve processing speed, executive function, sensory perception, and supported by biomarkers? Immune function is a really interesting one. There's been some great work happening in the gerotherapeutic space, especially with mTOR inhibitors, showing that there may be effects of gerotherapeutics in the short term of this 1 year, looking at a response to an antibody response to a challenge like a vaccine. And so this is it's a great way that this could be assessed. We can also look at evidence of viral burden or infections. There are cytokine panels, and we'll also be promoting certain immune cell count ratios. But some of that will depend on the availability of equipment by the clinical centers. So we'll have some give and take and opportunities to talk to our teams to help refine what this looks like. Important for each of these measures is that we need to have enough evidence behind them, because our key criteria, again, is as we're thresholding these, right? If we want to show that you're improving 10, 15, or 20 years, we have to have data to support that thresholding. Much of this data is sex dependent, right? Muscle strength for a man and changes in muscle strength for a woman may look a little bit different. So that when we're thinking about thresholding, we're looking at male thresholds, female thresholds, and that we will state these ahead of time, what that magnitude of change is expected to be. So again, that's just for thresholding. But for winning, again, this is the most simplistic version of this, is if you were doing just a standard randomized controlled trial, is that you have some baseline, you have some follow-up, you're measuring that trajectory, that percent improvement over time relative to control, whether that's your own control or you have this real true rigorous time control group. And so we're looking at the magnitude of change in 1 year, and we're simply comparing that change, that improvement relative to your control. And then we're going to be referencing that against those percent or change that we would expect in a regular population and say, do you meet these thresholds? Yes, no. But the hardest challenge is not, do you meet the thresholds? The hardest challenge is just this. Can you improve function, muscle, cognitive, and immune, all three? This will be the hardest challenge. Thresholding for money will be less difficult. Is that the first is getting all three. So that's the global challenge, and that this is how we're tying money to it. FSHD is more well recognized. Winning team has to show a 10% reduction in muscle fat fraction relative to control and a 25% improvement in at least 3 muscle-related endpoints. So again, mapping back to what we're doing in human for the muscle group in the Healthspan trial, it's going to be essentially those 3 measures that are selected, plus this muscle fat fraction, because that's a recognized endpoint for FSHD trials. Some additional considerations, of course, these are going to be prospective trials. We will be recording, and we need access to look at potential adverse events that are reported for safety. Our judges will take that into consideration. Tolerability. So this is, yes, it might be safe, but if people really hate it, it might show up in either their patient report of that, their symptoms reports. They might have accelerated sort of study dropout rates. So again, there's no money tied to that, but they're just judge considerations. And other considerations are around scaling and accessibility, is that we want to make sure that some of the solutions that make it to those finals have the opportunity for broader uptake. In addition, I think some of the key things that we're going to get out of this is not measuring a single therapeutic and looking at the effects or money given to one team, but it's really being able to harness and look within these and across trials at what's happening with the biology. So from these biofluid and biomarkers is that I think there's a real opportunity that I would love to see funded. I would love to have a bonus prize just on development and testing of biomarkers. And so I'm on a war path right now to make sure to see if we can get that funded and get that moving, because this is such a great area for development. We'll also be looking at clinical risk factors that can predict some of those clinical outcomes that might be relevant to FDA-facing trials. Okay, so in biomarkers, this has been, oh my God, this is my passion area, guys. So I really enjoy biomarkers, testing them, validating them. I love it. So when we're thinking about testing and validating biomarkers, one biomarker's not, they're all a little bit different. What's their use? What's their purpose? What are they looking for? So you can have a response biomarker. You can have a biomarker that's predictive or prognostic. And then the holy grail in trials is you have a surrogate marker. And so each of these, you require certain things. For response biomarker, you have to have an intervention that works, and you've got to measure that change in biomarker with the intervention. For a predictive or prognostic biomarker, you have this biomarker you're testing, and you see how well it predicts some health outcome that we all agree looks like aging. The surrogate marker, the hardest one that oh my gosh, so challenging, is you have to have an appropriate intervention, and you have to show that you have this improved health outcome. So you have to have both. And then you look to see if that biomarker is a mediator of that. And so again, these are really big keys in the field, and we've not been able to make progress in this area, because how a biomarker for a surrogate is qualified is that you have to measure not in a single trial, but across many trials, and develop this sort of dose response curve for how much that biomarker changes relative to the effect that you're looking at. And so this requires numerous studies and a meta-analysis. And so what are we going to do in this prize? We're going to have at least 10 trials. Hopefully, some of these will show an effect on those 3 important endpoints: muscle, cognitive, immune, using similar frameworks and similar measures. So this is a great opportunity to actually develop frameworks for testing biomarkers. But again, I would love to get a prize funded to do exactly this for biomarker validation and development. But again, I'm going to keep working on it, but I'm going to keep pitching it and putting it out there. But again, we can't wait for the perfect biomarker while we're developing trials. We also can't wait to develop trials until we have the perfect biomarkers. So you have to really develop these intentionally, thoughtfully, and together in this sort of, they feed one another. And so we have the opportunity to do this here. So we have a number of inputs. There are biomarker consortia. I have key people on my advisory board, including Alex, who have incredible strengths in biomarker development. There is a new prize put out by Methuselah Foundation that's not affiliated with our prize, but they are a partner, and they're developing biomarkers using different clinical data. And we've talked to them. Whoever wins that prize is that we'd like to have their measure. They would have the opportunity to test it in the Healthspan trials. And again, that's my pitch there around biomarkers, which I love. Registration, where are we at? Winning ideas can come from anywhere. These are nonprofits, academic institutions, research institutes, commercial companies, clinics. We have a number of clinics coming in. It's very cool to see. Again, you can enter with a single drug, or you can have this idea of how you're going to screen multiple drugs to find the right combination that you want to test in finals. Each entry must represent a distinct therapeutic treatment, again, whether it's alone or a combination, or whatever your steps you're taking to get to this are going to be. And you have to have a unique PI. The registration fees are written there. We're right now in a pre-registration. It's only $500 to enter to join us. Qualifying submissions come out later. At each stage, that registration fee does go up, especially after our milestones 1 and 2, because we have to repopulate a judging panel. And that requires a lot of time and expense on our part. And then going into finals, if those teams come in really late, miss those milestones, miss the training, miss everything else, is that we have to deploy not just a judging panel, but all of our training tools and protocol and everything to get up there. So that's the fees are really to help support the work that's required to judge those submissions. But it's certainly cheapest if you can come in between now and July 1. We currently, even though we're only in pre-registration, we already have over 270 teams registered from across 44 countries. This is truly global, and we're really excited. Where these countries are coming from, we have a high proportion from the United States, which is typical and expected. We really want to boost these numbers globally. So if you are out there and you're thinking about doing this, or maybe you're part of a group or a larger network, we would love to see this expand further. So please do reach out. Therapeutics that are being tested, again, these can be alone or in combination. Teams can select more than one category. This is for teams that have completed their full registration. 61% of them are proposing some combination. Many of them already have their regulatory paperwork at least in process. And this gives a snapshot of what people are doing. Again, these are simplified categories. The pink is combination, the red are those that are just monotherapy. And you can see that there really are a lot of crossover. A lot of that crossover is often with some of those lifestyle or behavioral kind of interventions. All right, so some key and important dates. Again, finalized guidelines are going to be coming out in July, as well as our primary registration period opening, and our qualifying submission guidelines will be out then as well. Huge, right there in the middle, inaugural XPrize Healthspan team event, the inaugural summit. It's going to be in Copenhagen at ARDD. A few other events are coming up, and I want to close on this slide. Please come see us, Aging Research and Drug Discovery in Copenhagen this August. I will be joined with Evelyne on stage that we're sharing a day with Longevity Medicine Day. So this is a great opportunity to learn about the prize, meet people who are leading the field, meet thought leaders around clinical trial design, development, and even biomarker testing, hear about some of the incredible therapeutics that are being proposed, meet some of our teams that are coming in. Many of our sponsors, donors, and benefactors for the prize are going to be present, as will many other investors, funders, and folks who are just really in the middle of this thing. Is that the only way we're going to make progress is if we work together to develop change and to push the field. No one group can do this, so please come join us in person. If you can, register quickly. It will sell out, and we'd love to see you.
This is so brilliant. Thank you so much, Jamie. And it was both fantastic to learn and once again review so many things about the biomarkers of aging, about aging itself, and then I was doing screenshots because it's really valuable to have the rules explained by you, and to see them. So it's really great and exciting. And we do have some questions already from the audience, if you allow.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. So I think we have the first question. Does XPrize provide any mentoring support for the teams that register?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So am I off screen share? I want to make sure that I am.
You are still sharing. You are still
Oh,
sharing.
no. Okay, stop share. There we go. Okay. Sorry, I was trying to exit out so I can see your faces. Okay, so do we provide mentoring support? Absolutely. So this is a huge reason why we're doing this, is we don't set our teams out into the wild, is that we're along the ride with you. And so, at least initially it's a little bit, we'll go through it. The first 40 teams, we make contact. We're in touch with you. We'll talk to those semifinalists. We'll have an investor summit where we get people together. The team summits are actually to drive collaboration between groups. It's an incredible opportunity that we're part of with you. especially in finals. The finals are really high touch. And so, we will be part of you. We're going to talk regularly. We'll have some centralized training. We do team summits. Again, we really want to make sure that the funding is not the issue for those trials. And so we're going to do a lot of work and try to partner and develop that ecosystem. We also encourage teams to meet up and join up. And so again, you can use this as sort of, your meet cute moment for if you have the therapeutic you've been working on and maybe you don't have access to a clinical site, or maybe you're a clinician and you really want to get involved in some of these cutting edge therapies. And maybe there's a team in your area that just needs support and help from a clinical center who can do this. Or, that there's so many opportunities for people to network and build together. We also have some teams that are in regions that they say, hey, you know what, we want to form a super group. We have a couple of these that are interested. They're like, the Southern Hemisphere needs to be better represented. So we would like to have our country or these few countries join together and create a super team. All fine. We're here for that, and we're here to help with matchmaking services and to join along. We're also working in the US. I would love to get like an FDA. Because the FDA can take a lot of time. And any of these applications, if you're getting regulatory approval, can sit on a number of desks. One of our goals is to try to get a help desk, a centralized help desk for people. And so again, these are just ways that we're trying to strategize as we move towards this to get people together. And as mentioned, one of the things that XPrize does that we're not typically really good at doing in the academic side is that they bring the public along. And so there will be camera crews, there will be documentaries, there will be groups supporting this. So it's a great chance even for publicity, for learning how to do protocols, getting a clinical center up and running, but also, gaining some access to greater notoriety and publicity.
This is great.
And there is one more question from the audience in the private chat, and it says that you said, Dr. Justice, that primary registration opens in July, but some of the teams apparently already registered, as we saw from the bar chart. So how does it work? What's the difference?
Oh, the 500, they're already in. So their registration's already paid. They don't have to pay again. They will have to complete the qualifying submissions that will be announced within the primary registration, but they have the benefit of early access. There is a social platform that is a channel that and a social media platform that's exclusive for teams that are registered so that they can communicate and get together. So those pre-registered teams, if they've already paid, they've already put in their intent to compete. That payment, they don't pay more as they go. They're done with payment. They have earlier access to again, some of those social channels. And then as soon as we announce and open up for primary registration, they will still have to submit a qualifying submission document by December 20th. And that's what's used for judging. But payment's done.
Okay, so December 20th is the official deadline as
That's
per,
right.
if you missed it, then you're done.
No, so if you miss it, you can still register. You can come in after that. You won't be considered for milestone funding, and you won't be as a named semifinalist that with awarding, because there is some monetary award for getting to be one of the top 40 teams. You just won't be considered as one of the top 40 teams, so you won't be eligible for money. The registration fee goes up, but we do have a rolling registration that stays open for teams that maybe you've got a therapeutic you're working on. You don't know if you're going to be ready for testing in humans in that time, so you want to delay it a little bit and make sure you can get your regulatory paperwork. That's fine. You can delay, you can come in late. In fact, classically in other XPrize competitions, teams that come in late that have the confidence to say, no way, I've got it together, and they're going to come in like 2 years in, they often do really well in the competition. So, we're not gatekeeping and shutting the door on anyone. It's just that they won't be eligible and that they'll have to pay a little bit more so that our staff can go out and get them caught up.
Great, thank you.
Oh yeah, thank you, Jamie, for this wonderful sharing. I joined a little bit late due to a natural disaster. And we all expect to see the oversubscribed ARDD and the XPrize Summit is going to be the highlight of the ARDD this year. I see that we have regional chapter heads for longevity medicine here from Indonesia, from from Japan, from Thailand. I wonder if we can talk a little bit more about kind of the international aspect of XPrize and how can more international groups from countries from every hemisphere join, participate, and integrate with the international community, because at the end of the day, we all want to get the FDA approval, right? But in the meantime, we will need to take a regional approach as well.
That's right.
How do you look at the regional side of things?
Yeah, so this is, again, this for us is one of the great challenges, is that in order to create real change, it has to come from more than one country. It can't be, I think in the US, we always take a very US centric approach, is that we think the FDA is the only way and that then the US teams are the only way. But what we know is that aging is global. And solutions that are needed must also be global. They have to be accessible, scalable, and applicable to more than one population, and need to be eligible for testing beyond the US as well. And so this is one of the really huge missions that we have, is we would love to see more teams, more networks, more development globally. And that will definitely, I can tell you for certain, making sure there's global representation is considered on our judges' scorecard. And so we want to make sure as these teams progress, is yes, we're looking for the best candidate teams, but we also want to ensure global diversity in the teams that go forward. So please, if you are considering joining a team, starting a team, or building a regional network, reach out. You have our top priority.
Thank you. So everybody on the call who are involved with regional chapters, let's ensure that you also participate in the XPrize, spread the word. We'll share this sharing online, right, to the entire CME community, longevity medicine community, and let's get more people registered, because everyone should be learning how to run those clinical trials, and I think the XPrize should be part of longevity medicine in general.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. There is some few moments in the chat. I will just quickly check if those are questions. I think we went through Colin's questions. Alex, I think those were the ones that we started with. Wonderful. In that case, thank you so much. Thank you for going over time. Thank you for rescheduling after our new experience 2 weeks ago, and and really looking forward to be in touch. And once again, welcome everyone to Longevity Medicine Day as opening day at ERDD conference, which will be this year also the Healthspan Summit of the XPrize, and it will be truly a very very filled program, not only with informations that are very, very important for all the teams that will be participating, but truly for everybody who is interested in deeper level of clinical biomarkers, of clinical trials, on how to construct, conduct, and succeed in N1 trials in longevity medicine. We will be talking on repurposed drugs as implemented drugs already in longevity clinics. So, and this will be not only one day this year, it will be a whole track. So the clinicians will have their own designated track through the entire week, and that will also be co-shaped with XPrize. So see you all in Copenhagen in the last week of August.
That's right.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Thank you, everybody.
So much to Dr. Justice, to our panelists. This webinar was hosted by Longevity Education Hub, so please visit our website, longevitydegree.com, to see our courses. Thank you so much, and have a good rest of the day.
Perfect. And we'd like to thank Peter Diamandis for putting XPrize together. I think that's the most impactful person on the planet. And also thank Evolution for making it happen. It's probably the most wonderful initiative out of the Middle East. So thank you very much. Thank you for bringing Jamie on. And it's a truly great time to be in longevity, great time to be in longevity medicine. Let's grow the community and spread the word.
It's great.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
One.